About problems America faces, tomorrow President Biden heads to Philadelphia to talk crime. They are on pace to set another murder record this year, different kind of gun violence. 300 have already died this year under DA Larry Krasner's soft on crime policies. Republicans in the legislature want to impeach Krasner. We'll see what the White House, what the president says about that tomorrow during his visit. But Mr. Biden today went to Massachusetts. There he did not talk about crime.
Climate change is literally an existential threat to our nation and to the world. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger. This is an emergency, and I will look at it that way. I said last week, and I'll say it again loud and clear. As president, I'll use my executive powers to combat the climate crisis in the absence of congressional action.
His executive powers are wildly contained by a recent Supreme Court ruling that took on executive actions by his old boss, President Obama. We'll put that aside for a second. Let's just think about this from the White House's perspective. Seriously, President Biden today hit a new lowest approval rating ever, 31%. He is now the most unpopular president at this time in his presidency ever by a long shot. Yet the White House sends him to Massachusetts, full speech today, to double down on something that just 1% of voters, probably ones who already support the president, say is the most important issue for them. Take for a second what you think of climate change out of this. Take out and forget the $2 billion plus in spending that President Biden announced today. That $2 billion he's going to use to hand out free air conditioners. Politically, it seems a little bizarre. Lauren Wright, associate research scholar and lecturer in politics and public affairs, Princeton University, is with us now. Lauren, give the White House their due. When smart people do things that don't make sense, there's something you don't understand. What don't we understand about the polling here?
Well, what's complicated about climate change polling, it's not as controversial of an issue as it used to be. First of all, that's changed dramatically. And it's one of these local issues where, as you just mentioned, or NewsNation discussed in rush hour, this is an issue that these extreme weather events affect people, whether you're in a red state, whether you're in a blue state. And so when people experience these massive heat disasters, when there are fire warnings in an unprecedented way, that makes the issue a little more apolitical. And so if Biden can thread this needle, which is very hard to do, and we always talk about it, between high gas prices and investing in renewables, that might be a successful move for him, but that remains to be seen.
Well, certainly, we learn this in local news, that the weather affects everybody. When you can lead with weather, you do. When you can be talking about the weather, it's what everybody's talking about when things are so hot. The only thing people probably are talking about more than the weather is high gas prices, is continued inflation, which I'm wondering how the administration has it both ways, right? We're trying to fight high gas prices, but we're also trying to fight climate change. Here's a couple of the president's advisors, including the Secretary of Transportation, trying to thread that needle.
The more pain we are all experiencing from the high price of gas, the more benefit there is for those who can access electric vehicles.
We don't want new major projects that would take 20, 30 years to become profitable. So we have to make that differentiation to make sure that the American consumer has what it needs to grow our economy and the global economy, but not take steps and endanger the climate work that we're trying to do to make sure that we're on a better footing to accelerate the transition.
Do voters make the distinction between people saying high gas prices are good because it hastens our change to renewables versus how much this is affecting my pocketbook?
Well, my pocketbook and my neighborhood and my state are all issues that voters care about. And so the strategy that those examples illustrate is we need a long-term solution to climate change issues and these extreme weather events. Wind only accounts for about 9% of U.S. energy production, so we're a very, very long way away from that. But in the immediate time, we probably need to seek fossil fuel oriented solutions to get these prices down. And that's, of course, difficult. And moderate Republicans like Jeff Merkley are dealing with that right now. And they're saying, look, in my state, this is important. And so, I often, Leland, you and I talk about, is Biden pandering? Who is he pandering to? What's the payoff of appealing to Democratic voters on issues, since they're never going to vote for Trump or DeSantis? But the truth is, this is one of those issues that's a tough communications task, but it does have really complicated facets where there's maybe some room to get more Americans on board.
Some overlap, and you talk about tough communications. Tough communications has probably not been the Biden White House's best strength, but you try to sort of split the baby here, if you will. 47% say the country is headed in the wrong direction, Biden's policies on climate change. 49%, though, say the right direction. So conceivably, this is one of the very, very few issues that he is above water on. Makes sense that they are trying to talk about it. Overall, though, right direction on climate versus right direction on economy. National gas price average today, $4.45. A week ago, $4.61. Month ago, $4.97, coming down. A year ago, $3.17. Chris Steyerwalt and I were talking last night. We're getting to the point in the election cycle that people's feelings about the economy are baked in. You can't change it even if prices in the numbers change. Where are we on that timeline?
We still have quite a few weeks to go. And I'll just say, like a broken record, that, election results, actual results, don't perfectly mirror predictions until the final days before an election. But regardless of that, sometimes it's reasonable to cut Biden a break, because what is a president supposed to do when gas prices come down? I mean, no politician, it would be political malpractice not to credit claim, not to say your agenda is working. And so there are these things that are just typical political moves. Another one is declaring a state of emergency, which is just a tool in the toolkit that maybe works when Congress is going to do absolutely nothing on this, which Joe Manchin has ensured. Well,
yeah, and it's exactly the playbook that President Trump did. He declared an emergency on the border to be able to free up money. I got to get you on this. Sort of the climate folks who loves, talking about the climate, saving the climate, and then fly their private jet 12 minutes for a drive that would have been 30 minutes. I'm talking about Kylie Jenner. More closer to the Biden administration is John Kerry, and the list goes on, Drake, on and on. Does it matter with these young, persuadable, or I shouldn't say young, these young climate activist kind of voters who love talking about the climate? They're young, they're impressionable, and then they see this. Does the hypocrisy matter to them?
Yes, I think hypocrisy matters to all voters. And so that handful of examples, and it's a very small group of people who get to do those sorts of things. But when celebrities are hypocritical, there are not many more focal points that are more useful politically than that. And Republicans are definitely going to take advantage of that.
Indeed. Lauren, very few can talk about the polling on climate change and Kylie Jenner in the same segment and do so intelligently and deftly. It's good to see you as always.
Thanks, Leland.
Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.